Now recording. So, a couple of notes about the midterm. The midterm that you're going to be writing in distinction with this midterm. The midterm that you're going to write next week will have a PHP syntax reference sheet as the back page. I believe this one did not. This one is quote unquote a 90-minute exam, but it's got the extra 20 minutes for UDL. You guys familiar with that structure? You've probably seen it a few times before. So the idea is, right, you design the test for 90 minutes, but you give people 110 minutes. And like for people who are like, people who need extra time accommodations, that 20 minutes is like part of their extra time accommodation. So it's like extending X percentage of extra time accommodation to the entire class. That's why it's UDL, Universal Design for Learning. But you know, anybody who's thinking sufficiently clearly about it is like, well, has it been designed for 90 minutes? Right? Like, designing, like, you know, let you all in on a secret. Professors do not sit down with their test questions and say, okay, this one will take them 10 minutes, this one will take them 20 minutes, this one will take them 10 minutes. That's not how tests get put together. It's just you throw a bunch of tests in a document, you take a look, you squint at it and say, that's a bit too long, I'll take a couple of questions off, right? That's like the actual process by which these things come about. So, like, this is kind of just like making the thing more complicated than it needs, like making the instructions more complicated than it needs to be without actually providing any benefit to the student, in my personal opinion. But, you know, we'll keep the same structure. The new one is a test that's been designed for 90 minutes insofar as that's possible, because the amount of time people take to take tests, like, it's not like all students are finished at exactly like 75 minutes, right? You know, but anyway. So let's get to the actual questions. Are there any questions about the midterm in a general sense before we start going through the questions? Yes?
When is it?
It's, for this section, yeah, it's Monday in our regular 11 a.m. class. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So, obviously this is not the same test that you're going to be writing on Monday, but, you know, the material it covers should be, you know, reasonably the same sort of area. So, question 1. Place the following steps in the client-server communication cycle in the correct order. Assume that the client is a web browser and that the server is running a LAMP stack. Also assume that the initial HTTP request is for a PHP file. So, basic ordering question. So, why don't you guys take a minute or two to come up with your answer to this question, and then we'll go through it. Okay? Let me just check to make sure my camera's running. Yeah, everything's good. So, for this type of exercise, it's best to as closely simulate the testing conditions as possible. So if you have some paper, you should write your answer down on paper, right? If you don't have paper, write your answers using a plain text editor that doesn't do syntax highlighting or help you in any way whatsoever, like Notepad. You should try to simulate testing conditions, which is exactly what you should be doing when you're doing your own studying as well. Is everybody finished? Put your hand up if you're finished with the question. People still working? Okay, so what's the first one?
The client sends an HTTP request.
Yes. Can I do this so that I can actually write on this? Yeah! Awesome. So, client sends the HTTP request. Item number 1. What's next? The server receives it. Very good. What's next? This one?
Server transmits the HTTP response to the client.
I think I should do that.
Sorry, let me just give me just a moment. No. See, interpreter. Yeah, so load the file. Yep. I'll say load the file. What's next? Sorry, can you speak up a little? The last one? Yeah. You have to have your super globals created before you start running the script, right? What's next? Kind of gave it away.
Run the script.
Run the script. Right? So, of the 3 remaining,
Transmit the response to the client.
yep. Transmit, then receive, and then process. Make sense? So far, so good. Question number 2. From the perspective of processing in a server-side script, are there differences that the script can detect between an HTTP request caused by entering a URL or by clicking a link, or one that has been generated by an AJAX GET request? Note, do not include client-side details or considerations. I will give you a couple of minutes to think about that one. And and I encourage you to think about that question carefully. Question?
I have a question for cookies. Are they considered a client-side detail? Because they're generated by the script, but each user has their own.
Yeah, but they're like cookies are like the client server communication,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, I'd say you can talk about cookies. Yeah.
Okay.
And be sure to ask me about cookies in relation to this question once we discuss the answer. So, yes or no? Are there differences?
I want to say no. There's no differences, but using cookies, you can tell how late is that maybe.
So with cookies,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter where the request originates.
Yeah.
All of the cookies will be sent using all of these methods.
Yeah, I was just thinking, if you're on like Amazon, right, and they have, if you click a link and you get a really long URL bar, there's some data in there we can tell from that.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if that's a cookie thing though.
No, that's the sent request parameters, right? It's absolutely possible to make an AJAX call in the console using the same request parameters, right? So basically, you can boil this question down to, can the server tell the difference between an AJAX request and like entering the URL? This is a smart class. Very good. The answer is no. Generally, no. Now, it is possible for an AJAX call to distinguish itself by setting different metadata or doing something like that, right? But if you were designing if you were trying to write an AJAX call which perfectly imitated a request by URL bar, you could do it, right? So the answer is generally no. Okay? Sound good? Any questions? All right.
How would you want us to word this
Yeah,
question?
because it's over 4 marks, like what would you?
So for this
Have
question,
to say to get forward. All
Like, I
four.
can't just say no and then just
I know it's like
no, bye.
Yeah, it's 4 marks.
no, goodbye. Actually, I remember grading this, and like if somebody said like for me like getting yes or no correct was like definitely most of the marks. So one word was most of the marks when I was marking this. However, I would want like you've been given this much space, I would want some justification. You know, perhaps put it in a sentence. Say like, although there are some small things that might be set differently in these cases, in general, the server would not detect a difference.
So just a one sentence.
Yeah, put it in a sentence, and that's,
That's 4 marks?
yeah,
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm good with
Good to
that.
know.
Yeah.
That's what I hate. I hate mark values because they throw off your answer so much. Like
Yeah.
something like that. It's a simple no.
yeah.
4 marks.
Let me put it to you this way, right? Most of these questions were written by Steve Adams, and he's a little bit verbose. You may have noticed this about him, a little bit verbose. Steve Adams is in verbose mode all the time. Dash V always said. So, let me pull down my. So, question. Are AJAX requests more trustworthy than user input URLs? Why or why not? 2-mark question. Let's, do you want me to give you time or do you just want to talk through it? Yeah?
I'm gonna say
Just
that's
talk
honest,
about it.
never trust the client.
No, because never trust the client?
Yeah, you could make your own AJAX request too, if you wanted.
Any other answers on offer?
Isn't Ajax usually more secure than JSON? So that's why you use.
More secure than JSON?
Sorry, it has like a built-in I'm trying to word it in a way that's like,
Mhm. So does Ajax have a built-in security mechanism
Yes.
that is not in the URL?
yes.
No.
No.
No, I think Ajax and URL, they are both from the client side.
Yes.
You can trust.
So anybody, when I was grading this last year, anybody who wrote never trust the client got full marks without me reading the rest of it. Yeah. Not on the whole, on the question, not on the whole test. But yeah, basically, the answer to this question is never trust the client, but also, if you were paying attention in the last question, well, if you got that last question correct, right? Server can't tell the difference between these things anyways, right? So no, Ajax is not more inherently secure than URLs. You have to, like, not that you can even tell the difference incoming, but you can't say, okay, this type of request is coming from my JavaScript that I wrote, so I can trust it. You can't do that. Never trust the client. Okay? So, question number 4. What is weak data typing? Provide a short example using PHP. What problems can occur because of weak data typing? Hint, 0, false, and null. How can these problems be avoided? This one I'll give you guys a few minutes to crunch through. I think 3 minutes. 3 minutes good for this one. some of these questions kind of border on like essay style.
Yeah.
Yeah. Personally, I don't like grading essays, so given that I did most of the test for this new test, the question response areas for the short answer question are actually short. Question?
I was just gonna say, I can answer the very last part. I'm just waiting for how can these problems be avoided?
You know, when people were actually doing this question, that was the part of the question they most frequently like forgot to answer. Yeah. People kind of have a tendency to like front load.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more like, cause it's more like, I know how to avoid it, but like, I'm not gonna remember exactly how PHP.
Yeah.
Because like, we have PHP, C#, and then there's some Java stuff in software quality testing, and
Yeah.
learning SQL, so it's all like.
Well, to start to get into the solution, because the time is now expired, C# and Java don't have weak typing.
Yeah, they're strongly
Yeah.
typed, which is
Yeah.
why I like.
So, can anybody tell me what weak typing is? Yes.
Weak typing has that when multiple distinct values are treated the same, like false, 0, null, in the compiler,
Treated the same by what?
by the code, by the compiler.
By
Interpreted, sorry.
I can help with
Just-
that.
yeah.
Basically, there's strict and weak equality, and yeah, okay, yeah.
I mean,
Come on.
you were most of the way there, right? But to do like the code example,
Uh-huh.
right? I would expect something relating to the equality operator. Like if you showed me an example in the code example that demonstrated that with the difference between strict and weak
Yeah.
equality, I would have said, oh, yeah, he knows what he's talking about, right? So yes, common misconception on this problem is confusing this with dynamic typing, right? Can anybody tell me what dynamic typing is? Yeah, can anybody tell me what dynamic typing is versus weak typing, because they're not the same thing? Yes?
Would dynamic typing be like just like declaring it, like just like that, without having to like say what it is, what types of data type is?
Yeah, that's like syntactically how you get dynamic typing in a language. But like, what does dynamic typing actually do? Yes?
Is it where like the interpreter figures out what type of variable is? Like,
Yeah, so you assign something to a variable, right? Later, you can assign a different data type to the same variable, and the compiler just kind of keeps up with what types your variables are,
Like,
right?
you don't sort of like automatically
Like,
I guess.
Yeah, you can think of it as automatically casting.
Okay.
I sometimes joke, like JavaScript does this as well, and I sometimes joke that in JavaScript you only have one data type and it's awful. Sometimes they're all like, they're storing everything as like one kind of base type of thing in the back end and like having like some kind of label that tells you what kind of type it is. But yeah, question?
Sorry, it was just a better understanding. So it's just like, okay, you took an input as like a string, and then later on the code to do a comparison, you maybe convert it into a game.
Yeah, so dynamic typing is you say something like x is equal to 5,
Yeah.
and then later on x is equal to false. And that doesn't cause a compiler error.
Yeah.
That's dynamic typing.
Okay.
A lot of people, when they were filling out this question last year,
Yeah.
thought I was talking about this. But what I was actually, what the question was actually asking about was the behavior of weak versus strict comparison. And weak versus strict comparison only occurs inside of the equality operators, right? That's why I was asking you to be a little more specific about what construct you
Oh, I was getting to that.
Well, fair enough. Yes.
You can avoid this by code, like treating your code like Java, or is that something else?
Yes, so which of these two gets you Java-like behavior?
Triple.
Correct.
Yes.
Right. So using this wherever possible, using strict equality will avoid many problems that can arise because of not distinguishing between the two. Yes.
So, like, Sweden, is there any real difference between like weak, like typing and dynamic typing, or dynamic typing causes weak typing? Is that
No, you can have dynamically typed languages that do not have a strong weak equality distinction. Python is an example. So in Python, you can do this, but there's no difference between strong and weak equality. Python always, like in JavaScript terms, it always uses this. It always uses strict
so
equality.
it's not weak?
I think.
So it doesn't have weak data typing. It just has dynamic typing.
Correct.
Okay.
And if I'm remembering my Python correctly, which maybe I'm not. But so somebody give me an example of some PHP code where this distinction shows up. Anybody want to do it on the board? Yeah.
Here you go, sir.
Sure. So I would probably want a bit more like meat on the if statement. Would that make sense? Like, show me where you get a result that you want but you don't get because of weak typing, right? Like for example, just make this into an if statement, right? If this echo,
Good job.
yes, else, echo good job or echo no. To be precise about it, I would say give me an example where I expect yes but I get no.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
But another classic one, which we talked about a few times in class. Thank you very much. Round of applause, everybody, please. Another one that's actually given in the text of the question. 0, false, and null will all equate to each other under weak equality, but not under strict equality. Does that make sense? So yeah, something like that. Pretty good. Any questions about that question? Okie dokie. Moving right along. So now we have short code questions. Here we go. What is the output of this code? Can you see that from the back? Let me see if I can increase the magnification a little bit. There we go. So, I'll give you guys like a minute. Crunch through that.
So, what does it go to? A goes to
It's concatenated. Yeah. All right. So, easiest thing to do for this is to do a short little program trace. In terms of the answer you have to give, this would be a one-liner, but let's show some process. So we've got A, B, C, and D. A is the string 1, B is the string 1 frog, C is the integer 4, and D is the integer 2. So, we must, next line we're assigning to D, we must calculate A concatenate B. So what is A concatenate B? 11 frog, right? Because it's string concatenation. Next we have multiplication. So I will preface this by saying this operator does not function the way it does in Python. You already answered one. I think you.
I was gonna say, wouldn't it be 4 of the 1 frogs, like 1 and then,
That's the way that it works in Python. So actually, no, that's not how PHP works. Did you, yeah?
That's actually exactly what I was going to say. I thought it was going to be 4 11 frogs.
Nope.
11 for full.
Nope. Because that would be concatenating the value here as if it were a string. Yes.
Is he just gonna find anything in the string that's a number and just multiply C with that number? So you
That was my second guess.
Yeah.
That was my second guess.
That's it.
That's my
So-
second guess.
So what this will do, right? If you take a string and you perform arithmetic multiplication, remember that PHP doesn't like to overload its operators, right? That's the reason plus is not used here for concatenation. Dot is used for concatenation in PHP because they don't like plus and dot having the same, like, they don't like plus having two different things, right? It doesn't, you don't apply that to different types. Anyway, so 11 frog multiplied by C, which is 4. So what will it do? It will take this and perform string to integer conversion. Right? Under string to integer conversion, it examines the string, picks out all of the numeric digits that are in the front of the string, so in that case these guys, and that is the integer interpretation of the string. So it converts this to 11. Yes?
Does that mean if I have like 11 frog, 22, it's just going to take the 11, it's going to ignore the 22 at the end?
It will, yes, actually, yeah. So if you have more numeric digits here, it'll drop them.
Okay, so just the first, it will take anything up till it finds something that's not an integer,
Yep.
and then it'll kill it.
Precisely so. It takes up to the first non-numeric digit, although that also includes period,
So
right?
I can
Because you're doing
include-
floats.
So if I had like 11.05, right?
Yeah.
It would drop the period.
No, it wouldn't. It would convert to a float instead.
Okay, so it will
Yeah.
take everything.
Yeah. It will also convert numbers like this, like 1.7 E8, because that is scientific notation. It'll also crunch that correctly. But yeah, it will stop here and frog will be
So
lost.
what if I have a second period? So what if I do like 1.75?
Like 1.7.5 type thing.
Something like that, yeah.
I'm pretty sure it'll drop here because you've already had your period.
Okay.
It takes like it takes whatever the prefix of the string is, which represents a valid number.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it give you an error though?
Nope.
I just wrote this in the compiler. ever into at least a test,
Yeah, it's cheated.
yeah, and testing to make sure how it works, because I'm curious.
Yes, so, just give me a moment and I can, if you guys want, I can like pull up an online PHP interpreter, we can do that.
It says, oh, that's in that, so it's in there. But
Negative 42 is the correct answer. But, yeah, okay.
So, wait, it would get rid of frog?
It would get rid of frog.
what?
String conversion takes the first numeric characters until it encounters a non-numeric character, and then it drops the rest.
So why would it be negative 42?
Actually, because that's how, if you look up the definition of string to integer conversion in the C standard library, that's how it works.
I know that.
Yeah.
Why would it not put the back together, just replacing it?
Because this is an arithmetic operation, it's expecting two integers in and an integer out. Or, it's expecting two numerics in if we include floats, right? It's expecting two numeric in, one numeric out. We cannot attach frog to the end because that would make the output type string. Right? It does make sense, but you have to like you have to mess around with your brain a little bit. But
Sorry.
yes,
It says D minus equals wherever on
Yeah.
these two. So
Yeah.
shouldn't it be D equals 2 minus 1 and then minus 1?
no, because now we're operating in numeric. We're operating in number land. So D is an integer, right? This is now also an integer. So 2 minus 42, 2 minus 44 is negative 42. So it's just plain math.
That's the answer.
That's it. Yeah. It's interesting. I didn't expect this question to be so controversial. So. Will this work? We'll find out. So.
I don't want to.
Sometimes that screws up the operators, but yeah, unmatched parenthesis. There we go.
Just a warning.
Yeah, it'll give a warning, but the answer will be 42. Negative 42. Yeah, negative 42.
Why negative 42?
Because this is 44,
Yeah.
and 2 minus 44
Oh,
is negative
yeah.
42.
Okay.
D minus equals.
Yeah, no.
Okay, cool. Shall we move on?
Sir, sir.
Yes. What? Where? Question? Who? No? Okay. Moving along. Question 6. Given a function, my function, which takes no inputs and returns an integer greater than or equal to 0, false, or null, write an if statement which outputs either the integer is n, where n is the value of the integer, the result is false, or the result is null, according to the output of the function. Now, before you start on this, I'm going to give you a little bit of a hint, as this one was, there was a very common error last time this test was run. When it says given a function, that means I am giving you the function. You do not have to implement the function. The point of this question is not to implement the function, my function. Alright? The function already exists. All you need to do is call it. Okay? I can't tell you. It's probably like 60 or 70% of the class that got that wrong the last time.
I feel like
So.
that kind of way that I feel like I guess letting people know that would also just be the have like a version of function on the page.
maybe having a function. on
Yeah, like,
There with a big.
Open bracket, close bracket.
I agree that this question was badly worded, that's why I gave you the hint. So, let's see, I'll give you 3 minutes for that, we'll see where we are. Sounds good? Question?
And this is interesting, could I use ternaries for this? Would that be acceptable? I know it says if.
I would accept ternaries if you used them correctly. Now, keep in mind that this is like, you would have to use nested
That's what I'm doing.
ternaries.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, I'm cool with that. Yeah. Okay. Ready? Yeah, ready to go? Anybody still need any time? Okay. So, although it doesn't look like it, this is another question on weak typing. Right? So what you have to do first is you must save the output value of the function. You must run the function and save the output value. So something like out is equal to my function like so. Next, we write an if statement. Why can't we use switch?
Switch can't use strict equality.
Correct. Switch can't use strict equality.
Why?
It just defaults to weak equality, and there's no way to control what equality operator it uses, unfortunately.
Switch sucks.
Like, think about when you're writing a switch case, right? It's like switch variable name, right? Where's the equality operator? Where do you specify that? You don't. So, and it defaults to weak. So,
How would it default to weak? It's dumb.
Because PHP defaults
Yeah, because like PHP thinks of weak equality as being the one you want most of the time, probably.
You have to ask for her.
Yeah. Exactly. So so anyway, if out is strictly equal to
Zero, false or no?
yeah, well it's 0.
Greater than or equal to 0, false or no?
Yes. So let's do false first. It's arbitrary which order you do these in. Echo. The result is false. Because as we know, false won't actually print if you try to string convert it. Else, if out is strictly equal to null, echo whatever the thing was, the result is null. There are no points for being fancy, you know, and like keeping a string and setting the result is, and then using the if statement to determine the last thing, and then outputting that. You know? So wait a second. Okay. Yeah. One thing that you have to watch for on questions like this is the wording around what is meant by output, right? Like if we were within the context of a function, output would mean returning a string, but because we're not told we're inside of a function context, output could mean returning a string, but it could also mean echoing. Both would be valid, because it's kind of a little bit ambiguous in the question. So in this case, I was just checking to make sure it didn't want echo, it didn't want returning a string instead of echo. But in this case, but you see, if you made the mistake of thinking you were filling out the contents of this function, right, and you were using echo, like, it's kind of an issue on top of another issue, but still less correct. So, do we have anything for 0 specifically?
No.
No, okay, so then it's just else, and the output is the integer echo, the integer is out. And that's about as much as you need for this one. Yes?
Two questions. One, how would you do does not equal with strict equality?
Not double equals.
Okay. And greater than or equal to, or less than equal to, or is that possible?
Contrary to what some people put on their tests, PHP does not have this, unfortunately. So if you wanted greater than or strictly equals to, you'd have to say x is greater than y, or x, x is, strictly equal to. You get what I'm saying, right? You'd have to perform both of those tests individually. Yeah. Question?
Since you did the after, like, showing a greater and then strictly checks for the same type, but also checks for the same value, so is that not contradictory?
In this example?
No.
Or in this
Just
thing?
yeah.
Oh, the thing where it was x is greater than y, or x is strictly equal to y. That one?
Oh, that's, oh, I thought that was and. With two.
Yeah.
So like, will the syntax, oh wait, never mind, sorry, I'm having a moment.
No trouble. Any questions? Okay, shall we move on then?
Next is the question we had a while ago. I think we were talking about having to strike for every issue.
So, in the following code, if a parameter with the name foo is not included in the sent post request, an error will be generated. Rewrite this code using best practices so that this error can no longer occur. So, a little hint for this question, the phrase using best practices is carrying a lot of the question points.
So you want us to sanitize?
Yes, basically.
Do you think people get a copy of this syntax sheet before?
Oh yeah, shoot me an email, I'll distribute the syntax sheet. Yeah. I'll make sure there are no midterm questions on it before I send it around.
You don't gotta
They're
worry
like,
about
aw, sir.
Don't worry about that last part.
Yes?
Can you explain, like, because I saw this in last semester for Java, why are you using foo? Is it just like, I don't know.
So it's it's kind of like computer science deep lore. Nobody's quite sure what the origin of the term foo is. It's simply been used in textbooks and in like teaching materials for computer science since computers were invented. One of the
Because when I think of foo, I just think like someone like in like my work system, he just says, yo, what's up, foo?
yeah, so it's foo and it's bar. Foo, bar, and baz. One theory as to the origin of foo and bar is that foo bar was military slang during the Second World War that meant effed up beyond all reason. So that's one theory as to the origin of foo and bar, but there's actually a Wikipedia article on this topic, if you can imagine. But yeah, nobody really knows why. It's just our duty to keep the tradition alive. That's all. So, are we good? Shall we go? All right. So, rewrite this code using best practices. If you will notice, what is this code vulnerable to? Yes, it's vulnerable to script injection, absolutely. Now, it is perhaps unfortunate that in this question, the printf function, which you may remember from Java, but you probably don't remember from Java, that's another C standard library function. It's actually like, if you've ever done any C programming at all, you will be well familiar with printf, but I don't think you guys have exposure to it in the program so far, not that much. So, in my view, its use here is somewhat unfortunate.
I thought we used printf like quite a bit in Java.
Oh, did you? Oh.
Use it all the time.
So
Oh,
that's-
cool. Right, like with like the tags and everything?
Oh, the formatted string.
The format strings?
Yeah.
Oh,
We did use that once, but not print F, like,
Oh.
as in the name, you know, print
Well,
F.
you could do.
yeah, it was
It was Java
system.out.printf,
specific, yeah,
yeah.
Well, you could do that, or you could use string dot format.
What's the
string?
Yeah, it's the same
That's
thing,
the
yeah,
one I
okay.
use.
Okay, so I'm underestimating your Java teacher then. So, I don't think that's like universally the case though. So, we filter it. Name is equal to filter underscore input underscore get. Name of the variable is foo, and then filter sanitize special chars. There we go. So what do we know? Yes, did I make a mistake?
Yeah, it's using post.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Host. So what do we know about the output of the filter input function? What can it possibly return? It can return null if,
Nothing's declared.
yes. If the parameter is missing, it returns null. So let's deal with that case first. If name, how many equal signs? 3 is correct. Equals null. The error should no longer occur. So when it says error should no longer occur, what it means is this access will cause like a syntax, or like a, not a syntax error, but a compile time error, or no, that's a syntax error. It'll just cause an error while it's executing. So we want to like basically not flunk out on PHP's own error. You want to generate your own message, which is handling the error, but it still probably has the word error in it, right? So like echo no parameter, man. Else if, what's another possible output from filter input? False? What do we get if we get false? Or pardon me, like what results in false?
If it didn't return certain.
Yeah, if the filter step fails, we get false. Now, sanitize filters are different from validate filters, right? So under a sanitize filter, like the worst thing that you would probably end up with, like say your entire string was an attack, right? It will sanitize the characters and keep going, right? So, the false outcome isn't really something, it's not a thing if you're not doing a validate filter. So you can skip it. In this case, but if it was like an integer, you wouldn't be able to skip it. Does that make sense? So else if, that basically handles everything else, right? This is valid, right? And then you can just either rewrite that line at the bottom there or just echo it like a normal person, you know. Echo name colon name. we go. So that's the full marks solution because of the phrase using best practices. The, yes?
Anybody else? Because
Oh,
there's an
yeah,
if with no
true.
bracket.
Thank you. The half marks solution was to write an if statement using is set. Right? If you read this question and ignore the phrase using best practices, you can answer this question by just gating all of this with, you know, if the name is not set, don't do anything. But if it is set, do this. But if you do that, you are still open to XSS attack, which means that you are not using best practice, which would also prevent the XSS attack, even though that's not explicit in the question. Again, this is not my favorite question. Question?
Maybe kind of a dumb question, but
There's no such thing.
well, sometimes filter it checks for like special stuff for scripting, but let's say should the user input so much data that like that it breaks because of a theoretical limit or something? Like because like even after it was set like
So the thing that it will do before it hits that limit is you'll hit like, you might hit like HTTP's limit on how much you can cram into a parameter using post. That might be where you hit a problem first. Like,
and what kind of would that just be client side or would it try and show something happened in the server side?
so what would happen, like either, I'm not, you're kind of, you should ask a networking guy, but either one of two things happens, right? Either the client refuses to send it, or it truncates the message.
Or would that be a false?
Oh, that wouldn't even make the server, so this script wouldn't even activate. The other option is like, the server sends back like a 500 error code. It refuses to process the packet in some way, returns some error code. But in either event, like, if the packet itself is invalid, the script will not be executed. And like you can imagine, like if this was the consequence of like a man-in-the-middle attack, for example, you know, where the packet's being modified in transit, it could become invalid in transit, but the server might still refuse to process it, and you know, it's kind of similar when we typically get the 500 if you've got a syntax error in your PHP that causes the interpreter to crap out before you even get to send any output, right? It'll send a status code 500 internal server error. I can't do that, sort of thing. Make sense?
Sort of, yeah.
So we can use filter input and then it is set instead of doing this.
As long as, if I was marking it, as long as you're fixing the XSS vulnerability, I'm not concerned about the particular order of things or what you're using specifically. But there are two things you need to handle. One is the error that happens if the thing is not set, and then two is no XSS vulnerability. If you've got those two, full marks, yes.
So there's two things you need to handle with the worst 3 marks each. What's the thought process behind it being 6 marks?
Ask Steve Adams.
Okay. Yeah, I guess.
Because it's really important, I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Because like, for the amount of code you're writing for this, it's disproportionate to the other questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I've tried to be a little more consistent with this year's. So, 8. How are we doing for time? We're not doing too bad for time, actually. How many longer coding questions do we have? Is this the last one? Okay. I kind of want to skip 8 and move to some of the longer questions. Is that okay? It's a little bit, easy.
So I have a question. Do we need to define a basic function on the test?
On the test that's coming up,
Yes.
do you have? Do I ever ask you to write a function? Yeah, I think there is on there. Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, you should know how to define a function.
So, this question here doesn't say use best practices, would you be dinged if you didn't sanitize?
Yes.
Yes.
Never trust the client.
Just wanted to make sure,
Yeah, I know.
since it doesn't say use best practices.
Accept 2 parameters. Yeah. So, the thing that this course attempts to teach is anytime you are receiving anything, just do it. Should it be in the question?
Yeah.
Yes. In my opinion. If it's any consolation, I hated marking this thing. It's like there are so many little things like that in it that students got tripped up on, and it's like, I was also constrained to using the grading scheme, right? So like, you can't have people be too inconsistent across sections with how the test gets graded, because otherwise you're like opening the test up to like being challenged, like in like the formal grade challenge process. So like we have to try to keep things consistent between sections, which means you kind of have to follow the leader on what the solutions are. But yeah, I think there were too many ambiguities in this test. Yeah. I have attempted, through my own efforts, to not have quite so many ambiguities in this one coming up. I can't guarantee that I got all of them right, but yeah. So let's skip this one. So we've got 2 questions left. We have the quote-unquote longer coding question. This is the file I/O question. We also have the debugging question, which basically asks you to rewrite the code such that various things are done. Oh, hey, look. I wonder what that might need.
Aww.
So, yeah. Which one do you guys want to do?
9. Move.
9, the longer coded question first? I'm asking you because I don't know if I can guarantee we'll get to both of them in the time remaining.
9.
9? All for 9? All for 10? Okay. Sorry. The will of the democratic will is against you, I'm afraid. Although, just so you know, this class is not a democracy. I am a benevolent dictator for life. However, for any good dictatorship, every once in a while you do want to consult the people. So, longer coding question. An HTML page sends GET requests to the PHP script fruitsbasket.php. These requests contain 2 parameters, fruit type and quantity, expecting integer. Fruit type is string, quantity is integer. A file on the server, fruits.txt, contains an associative array, JSON encoded, which maps types of fruit to their quantities. Is this sounding a little bit like assignment 2? Just a little bit? I should say that like of all of the questions on this midterm, this was the one that I wrote. So this is the one that, you know, is most representative of my style. Although I'm not asking you this question again. Write the contents of a PHP script, fruitsbasket.php, which performs the following operations. 1. Inputs are properly validated and sanitized before they are used. Note that that's explicit in the question this time. If applicable, you may assume for this question that the file is trustworthy. Right? So what does that mean?
Don't need to sanitize.
You don't need to sanitize the file, but you do need to sanitize the incoming GET request parameters. Right? Number 2, the contents of fruit.txt are read and decoded into an associative array. That's a thing you have to do. 3, third thing you have to do, the number of fruits of the type indicated by the received fruit type parameter is increased or decreased by quantity. So whatever type of fruit comes in through the parameter, that corresponding quantity is either increased or decreased. So if a fruit of that type does not yet exist in the array, add it. Quantity may not be decreased below 0. For example, if I have 1 banana and quantity is -2, that is an invalid request. So what is an invalid request to do?
No.
Nothing. Correct. 4, JSON encode and write the associative array into the same file, overwriting the original file. And 5, return either success or failure as strings, depending on whether the operation succeeded or not. So you may assume that the fruit.txt file already exists and contains a valid JSON, for example, the one given below. So, do you guys want some? Do you want some time to attempt this one on your own, or do you want me to just go at it? Just go at it. Everybody wants me to just go for it? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah, that was whole. Sometimes you ask a question and you don't realize you're asking everyone at once. Anyway, so let's go through this in order. I've been favoring this board today, so I guess I'll favor this board for this one. Okay? That's right. My right-hand side of the room, you guys are now no longer second-class citizens. So, opening PHP tag. Gotta have that.
That's actually very interesting.
Did we trip at the first hurdle? Yes. So the PHP script is the file itself, right? So I'm asking you for the entire file contents, right? I can't remember, like this, for these and longer coding questions, I'm not expecting exact syntax, right? So this is basically like an opening curly brace, but it's special for PHP. So like, I wasn't strict on it, right? But I am giving you what I hope is the most correct solution, which includes it, right? So next, inputs are properly validated and sanitized. We have 2 inputs. They are
Quantity and fruit type.
fruit type and quantity, expecting string and integer. So, for the case, just because of brevity, I'm gonna move through this, try to move through this quickly. So, type is equal to filter, terrible. Filter underscore input, get, fruit type, and then,
So percent
that's
bias.
special chars. I'm leaving some stuff out so I don't spend as much time writing. Quantity is the same, but, and it's the same up to here, but it's quantity here, and it's, wow, ditto marks really don't work in code very well, do they? Spend more time trying to avoid doing the thing than if you just did it. This one will be validate correct inputs. Alright, so we take our inputs, but we have to handle errors, right? So, I'm gonna do like a shorter way of doing this, right? Which a number of you I saw used in your assignment 1, so you should be familiar with this kind of instruction. If type is triple equals to null, or quantity is triple equals to null, or quantity is triple equals to false, because remember a sanitization filter will fail in a different way. Success is equal to false. Now, two options. This is enough to kill the script right there, right? Option 1 is to build an else case where the rest of the code goes. Option 2 is to use exit 0 or return, well, once you've echoed it. In fact, if you're doing that, you can just say echo false. Echo false, exit 0. Make sense? So far so good? So that checks off part 1. Part 2. The contents of fruit.txt are read and decoded into an associative array. So okay. Can I make a confession about this question? Or can I tell you something about this question? Something that really bothered me at the time that I'm only just now remembering. I had an example string down here, but somebody changed it on me, and I didn't have time to check their change before the test went out, and therefore this description of the contents of the file doesn't actually match what is here. I intended this question to be easier than it actually was. What I intended was for it to say associative array, Kiwi gets 5, banana gets 10, apple gets 15, like that, right? If you take a look at this, we've got an array of associative arrays where the tags fruit and quantity are kept constant, but the data is inside here, whereas I intended it to be exposed at the top layer. So, do you mind if I solve this one instead of that one? Because that's the way it's actually worded. Yeah, this caused me no end of trouble last year. I should modify my questions. So, you mind? I'm not pointing fingers, you know, but I am. So we want to decode this. We want to read the file and decode it into an associative array. If it's already an associative array, then that's all. Like all we have to do is read the file and JSON decode it, right? So, what is the procedure for reading a file? And I'll do this on the middle board. So what's the procedure for reading a file? First step,
Declare a variable that you want to put it under.
declare the file name as a variable.
Yeah.
Very good. Not technically required. Wasn't worth marks, but if you did it, it put a little tiny smile on my face while I was marking it. And you want me to be happy while I'm marking your test. File name was equal to fruits.txt. So, next, what do we do? We are reading a JSON. Very good. fopen. File handle is equal to fopen. File. What mode? R. Very good. For read mode. Next, we want to dump the entire contents of the file into JSON decode, and we want to write that to a variable. So how do we read all of the contents of a file? What do we use?
Fread.
Correct. So I'm going to do this on 2 lines, although normally in class I do this on 1 line. So file content is equal to fread file handle. What's the second argument? File size. Very good. File size. Does file size take the file handle or the file name?
No. I don't think
File name. That's right. File name. Fruits is equal to JSON decode file content, comma, true. What's the comma true for?
that it did open.
That it what?
It did open.
Nope. Correct. True means that JSON decodes it into an associative array, rather than decoding it as an object. The question explicitly asked for it as an associative array, so this had to be there, although it wasn't worth a great number of marks. It was very commonly forgotten. So, what do we do with files once we're finished with them? We close them. Fclose file handle. Some people chose to write fclose right at the bottom of their file. This program eventually requires 2 file reads, 2 file interactions. If you reopen the file handle without closing the first one first, and you write that to the same variable name, that is an actual problem. Like, that's an error, right? And that's something you would have lost marks for forgetting to fclose in the right place, right? Basically, any time before you open the next one, assuming you're using the same variable name, if you're using a different variable name for the next one, next time you do this, then you can do it right at the bottom of the file, right? You'll just have two files open simultaneously. Not ideal, but not incorrect, right? Does that make sense? Good. Any questions so far? Yes?
I kind of forgot what's the R for.
Oh, R means read mode, right? When you open a file, you open it in read mode or write mode or sometimes append mode. There are actually a lot of different modes, but for us, right here, right now, those three are enough. Make sense? Any other questions? Okay. So, do you mind if I just like read off of the prompt? You guys, many of you probably have the test open anyway. Okay. So that checks off part 2. Part 3, the number of fruits of the type indicated by the received fruit type parameter is increased or decreased by quantity. If a fruit of that type does not yet exist in the array, add it, and quantity may not be decreased below 0. So, this pulls back in our variables that we declared over here. If not is set, fruits at type we create it. Fruits at type is equal to 0. Now, you might be saying to yourself, why wouldn't you initialize that with the quantity? Because, friend, it is possible for the initial quantity to be negative, right? Remember that the question said quantity may never be negative. So, if it's initialized to 0, it's a non-negative quantity, but you're still fulfilling the condition of initializing the fruit if you receive the fruit, right? That being said, like, the specific order of the logic on this part varied greatly, and I wasn't too strict about, like, as long as everything would work out in the end, I wasn't strict about you have to do this, then you have to do that, right? So, good. Next, we need to see if the current quantity plus the value of the quantity parameter would be negative. So, if fruits at type plus the quantity as pulled from the get parameter would be less than 0, or is less than 0, we treat that as an invalid request, right? So, invalid requests echo failure and exit immediately. How am I doing for time? Yeah, okay. Right? Invalid request. Invalid request means that we're not updating fruits. So, otherwise, fruit at type plus equals quantity. Right? This fulfills the requirements for part 3. Part 4, JSON encode and write the associative array into the same file, overwriting the original file. In broad strokes, the procedure is very similar to the procedure here. But of course, we are performing a whole file write instead of a whole file read. Make sense? So, the file name is the same. We don't have to reset it. File handle is equal to fopen file name. This time, what mode are we in?
Right.
Correct.
Append, or
Yeah, it's right mode. Don't append in a JSON, because appending to a JSON will break the JSON. Yeah. It's fine for a CSV, but for a JSON, it'll break it. Now, we fwrite to our file handle the updated contents of the fruit associative array. JSON encode fruit. Then what do?
Close.
Flows. That fulfills the requirement for part 4. Part 5. Return either success or failure, depending on whether the operation succeeded or not. If you make it all the way here, and you haven't failed out on an error there or over there, you simply echo success, close off your PHP, and that completes the question. So part 5 basically was marks for, did you have the right, did I say false there? I meant failure. Part 5 was marks for echoing the right thing in the right places and then quitting. Or if you decided not to use exit and you decided to use more branching if statements, that was also fine. But you had to make sure you were echoing the right thing so that the final result of the script was correct. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay. How much time do we have?
24 minutes.
Oh, heck. We can do the other one.
We do have a.
Nice.
Yeah, we got a test.
We have a.
Oh, you have a test coming up?
We have a test.
Which one is it?
Software quality.
Software quality.
All right. For those of you who wish to leave to go to your software quality test, please do so. Please try not to knock over my tripod as you're reading. I will continue the class and I will do the final, the debug question here for the benefit of anybody who chooses to remain and for the benefit of posterity. I am recording this so you can catch that last question on the interweb, in the tubes, as it were. Question?
There wasn't a lot of sessions and cookies in this practice thing.
Yes.
Does that mean there's not going to be a lot of sessions and cookies on the real one?
The one that we're doing next week will have questions on sessions and cookies, but they will not be coding questions. They will be conceptual questions.
Awesome, thank you. And this video will be up sometime?
I will, if it's not up today, it'll be up tomorrow. Well, at midnight, so, you know. By Thursday, you will absolutely have it.
Awesome, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
You're very welcome.
Have a good day, sir.
And good luck. Good luck, everybody.
So does the question, the one where I asked if I could do ternary, specifically say,
Oh.
ternary, I guess when I hit Dr. Marks?
No, I wouldn't. I mean, someone who was being a bit more like strict might, but personally, if you know how to use a ternary, you know how to use an if statement. You know, they do the same thing. It's
Just one line, that's right.
yeah.
I like the one line.
Oh, wait, basically, an array of basic arrays is like.
Okay.
Wouldn't have those code documents if it was,
Is this the part where I turn off the camera and laugh maniacally? No. No, I won't do that. That would be mean. So, one final question then. Debug this code. The following code contains some problems. These problems keep the page from working and aren't just stylistic issues. For example, as written, the page shows parse error, syntax, unexpected, echo in test.php on line 16. Even after fixing that error, I still see some errors like notice undefined index, notice an undefined index on line 8 and 9. I got rid of the errors in this URL using test.php, name is Steve, guess who wrote this question. Password is 1234, but now I see my password field is huge, definitely not 4 characters. If I try putting stuff in from my fields and pressing submit, if I try putting stuff into the fields and pressing submit, doesn't match username password, then it just puts the form back up with nothing in it. If the stuff does match the username password, it doesn't show me the logged in message. Rewrite the code so that the two fields retain their entered values if name password aren't a match, and show the logged in message if they do match. Make sure you use best practices and that errors are handled gracefully. You may use either get or post. Although, you know. So that's because of an inherent contradiction here. So, you guys want some time to attempt this on your own, or do you want me to just go through it like I did the last one? Just go through it? Everybody who wants me to just keep trucking? Alright, sounds good. So, there are a couple of problems here. First, name and password should be filtered using the correct filtering process. We've seen this on this test like 5 times already. Here are 6 and 7. right? So in this case, in contrast to the example we were doing, that we were going to be working our way up to in class, the credentials that you're matching name and password to are here hard-coded into the if statement guard, into the Boolean expression. So, so problem number 1. What method are we using on the form? Post. What method are we using here? You should use post because it's a password, absolutely. However, the question says you can choose either because it's like, from the perspective of just getting the thing to bloody work, you either change that post to a get or you change those gets to posts. Either will fix the bug, but that is actually one of the primary problems with this piece of code. The reason that nothing is happening is because the PHP is looking for the inputs in the wrong place. Right? So, I'm just gonna, you mind if I keep it here? Like, keep a running list of changes? Cool. You guys are so easygoing. It's like, yeah, sounds good. Alright, 1. I would say most correct would be to change get to post, but either would be acceptable. 1 is get to post. 2 is filter name and password. So those are all things that we need to do, right? Now, anybody else spot, does anybody spot any other problems? So, let's consider what this thing is doing, right? We have an if statement here, testing to see what the incoming name and password are. If this test turns true, we state logged in, otherwise we show the form, right? Now, you'll notice some PHP tags here. Can anybody guess what those are doing? So, as written, PHP echo name takes the value of the name variable, which has come in through a get response, and it plops it down in the value field of the input with type name, or the text input with ID name, right? So basically, if you send the GET request for name with an attached name, it regenerates the form having name in the value field. So name, whatever you sent, will appear inside the text box once the HTML renders. Make sense? But there's another problem with this input. Can anybody spot what the problem is? on this line, there's something very important which is missing.
The semicolon is like, no,
You mean here?
never mind.
Yeah, that's fine. Now it has to do with the input tag, or the input element. The PHP is fine. Something is missing. An attribute is missing.
The actual name,
Correct. Yes. So name has not been specified, which you'll notice name has been specified on this one, right? So the name, like to know where to look up the item in the superglobal, we need to know what it was called, right? If name is missing on the input, then you have no name. You can't even send it, right? So that's another one. Name input needs a name attribute. That makes sense, right? That's another way that this is broken. Now, let us turn our attention, sort of aside from the fact that, like, this label I don't think would even work if you didn't specify the name, right? So let's talk about this one, because holy cats are there some problems with this guy. All right? So, number one, let's concern ourselves with the PHP. Do you see any problems with the PHP? You want me to just tell you? Look at the variable name. Do we see that variable PW appear anywhere else? That's right. We are trying to assign an undeclared variable, right? Because we didn't declare it as PW, we declared it as password, right? So that means this thing doesn't hook up here, which means the value will probably end up being like an empty string. Or it might even be like value is assigned to a PHP error string. I think that's actually more probable. So name, we have a name here. Is it correct? Why not? That's correct. Here, we are expecting the name to be password, like the full word password. Down here, we are only giving it PW, right? So we are, again, looking for something that doesn't exist in the superglobal. Make sense? So between all of those things, if you were to fix all of those things, that would be that question. Does that make sense? Looks like we are just about out of time. If you are writing that test, good luck with it. You should get to your tests now. Thank you for staying, though. I appreciate that at least a few of you did.